I maybe not the typical acquisition guy. I'm not a pushy person. I'm not going to go in and force my views on the seller. The seller has intentions, he has goals, and of course we have our own goals. And my thinking is that it has to be a good deal for both sides.
You're listening to Season 6 of In Good Companies from Cadence Bank, the podcast where we share the forces shaping business to navigate the opportunities ahead. We're empowered to help through this podcast or any one of our more than 350 locations across the South and Texas. Because that's what Cadence is all about. The expertise and flexibility to do business on your terms. I'm Ari Marin, and I'm your host. If you've been with us since the early days of In Good Companies, then you know that we love to talk about the art of the deal. Acquisitions are such an inherent part of business. But when you're a small business or someone trying to get to that next level, it can be intimidating to make those big financial decisions. So before we wrap up our season, we want to bring you a very personal take on acquisitions. A story from the small business guy who improvised a lot of his leadership and learned the art of the deal all on his own. And that guy, his name is Miles.
My name is Miles Crowe. I'm the president and co-founder of Crowe Custom Countertops.
Well, what kind of services does your company offer?
Well, as the name implies, we do custom countertops and countertop-related products and services. We do natural stone countertops like granite, marble, man-made quartz, and porcelain countertops. We also sell sinks, faucets, and supports and things connected to countertop installation.
You know the kitchen island where you have breakfast every day? The one that gets loaded with food every holiday season? It's made by someone like Miles. In fact, his firm is one of the larger granite fabricators in the country. Now, confession time, I actually know Miles, and here's what I can tell you about him. This man is a natural leader. He's a self-starter. He works hard, and he values teamwork. It's how he turned a two-man operation into a firm that has international reach and 5 locations. Miles has made a name in his industry. It's a real accomplishment. And the thing is, he's so humble about it.
Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, how did we end up here? And so I love to tell the story about how we got to where we're at. And it has so little to do with me, but, for what it's worth.
Sorry, Miles, I beg to differ. You definitely had something to do with it. In fact, I've got the evidence recorded right here. In this episode, we talked to Miles about how he managed 4 successful acquisitions. You'll hear how he brought a 2-man operation into the next level, and then the next, and then the next. Spoiler alert, Crowe Custom Countertops does $27 million in revenue today, and it's aiming for $100 million in the next 5 to 10 years. So there's a few lessons Miles can teach us. And to get started, let's get to know him a little better. Let's hear a bit about your story. What did you do before you started your own company?
Well, I never really had a plan to own a countertop business when I was younger. I went to college and I got a degree in criminal justice, and I had plans to go to law school. But I was also an aspiring musician, not a very good one, but that was my dream, and that dream got in the way of me going to law school.
What type of instrument did you play?
Play the bass guitar. I play a few instruments, but the bass guitar was my thing.
So Miles pursued his rock star dreams. And I mean, maybe there's an alternative universe where he's the new Paul McCartney. I like to think that. But in this timeline, life did catch up with him.
Somewhere in there, I got married and had a kid, and so I decided I need to get a real job. And a friend of mine offered me a job making templates and doing measurements for his countertop company in 1999. And I really enjoyed that job, but I ended up getting divorced and I became a single dad, so I could no longer work 50 hours a week like I was at that time. So I ended up going into commission-based sales with another countertop company in 2000. And I think both of those jobs really helped set me up to start my own business later down the road.
When you were growing up, your dad was also working on commission. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you think that gave you a kind of entrepreneurial mindset?
Definitely. My dad traveled a lot with his job, and he would take me with him a lot. And I got to see how he hustled to make money. And I saw how he talked to his customers and how he planned his day and how hard he worked to make his sales. He told me many times that I wake up every day and like I'm unemployed. and it's up to me to go out and make it happen.
I love that. I read that you started your business by accident. Could you tell us how you got roped in?
So the company I was selling for was very small, and the owner was pretty satisfied with where he was in his business, and he didn't really want to grow. And my older brother, Mike, started telling me that we should start our own thing. I kind of get a little emotional when I talk about my brother because he's the only reason I ever had the courage to get started. I never would have been able to do it without him.
We all get by with a little help. Sometimes all it takes to launch into business is someone believing in your potential. In Miles's case, it was his brother who said, "We're going to do this." He went in and hoped for the best.
I didn't know how to fabricate countertops, and neither did he, but he convinced me. So we took a class on countertop fabrication. It was a weekend-long class, and we borrowed $15,000 a piece on our credit cards, and we rented a 2,000 square foot space, and we decided to give it a go. Our goal was, when we started, was to do one kitchen a week, and we never did the math on whether we could survive on that or not.
So at this point, you were more or less a two-man operation. Tell us more about what those early days were like. You must have worn many hats.
Yes, we were a two-man operation. It was just me and my brother. And my brother was still working his regular job as an airplane mechanic. So a lot of it fell on me. And like I said, we were hoping to do one kitchen a week. But by the time we opened, we had 6 kitchens lined up to do. So we had to play catch up. I like to tell people we've been catching up ever since.
How'd you find those 6 customers, I wonder?
I was doing sales previously in my other job for the other company. And so I had built up a few customers, and they had enough confidence in me, thankfully, to give me an opportunity when we first got started.
The Crowe brothers started out pretty strong. But then 6 months in, Miles's brother, the one who brought the company to life, he had to exit.
You know, I wasn't really surprised because he had a great job and was only a few years from being able to retire. And we weren't even able to produce a steady paycheck at that point. So he came in one day and he told me he was going back to his real job, and he asked me to pay off his credit card if I could.
So Miles had to pivot. And he was quick on his feet too, because, well, just for context, at this point, the year is 2003. There's a recession going on, and everyone who is in business is trying to keep their heads above water. It's tough out there. But that adverse climate, it's actually what changed Miles. It got him locked in and committed to business.
Well, we were so small, and at the time, survival was all we really knew. So luckily, I found out that I was pretty good at sales. And I think the pressure of being a single dad, having credit card debt that I promised my brother I would pay off, and now having employees, all those things made me super determined and super aggressive. I didn't really have any other choice. I had to go out and make it happen one way or another.
And when did you first get into a position to expand, hire employees, grow your capacities? When did things start to maybe grow to the extent that you knew you needed to expand?
That's a funny story. We had actually been doing pretty good that first year, and I found 2 brothers who were willing to work part-time at night. It was a recommendation situation. Somebody knew these guys and knew they were good workers, and they were moonlighting, as they say, because they worked full-time in another company. And their boss ended up finding out after a few weeks, and he fired them. So I felt obligated to bring them on full-time, and that was our first experience of having found new or excess capacity. Since I had these new employees, I had more capacity to produce, and that allowed me to go out and hire another salesperson and then another salesperson. And that's when things first started to take off. We were actually able to buy a 10,000 square foot building in 2005, which allowed us more room to grow. But by the end of 2005, we were able to buy some equipment and switched into growth mode.
Legend has it that Crowe Custom Countertops must always have 2 hardworking brothers on board. Just kidding. But if you want a fun fact, these 2 brothers, the first employees Miles ever hired, they're still working for him now.
One of those 2 brothers is now my partner and now my COO. The other brother is my production manager.
So Miles created a culture of longevity for his staff. He turned his business into a place where people can grow. But that didn't happen in a day. In fact, he took a while to find his footing. So it seems like at this stage you're improvising a lot. When did you start to build a vision for the business, a true vision?
During the Great Recession, 2007, 2008, by that time, our business had mostly become focused on remodeling and selling direct to homeowners. We were scared to death, just like everybody else. I cut my pay just in case. I didn't want to have to terminate any employees, so I cut back my pay. I told other team members that if they had a job opportunity presented to them, don't turn it down, because I couldn't guarantee anything, but we were going to do everything that we could. We had also started doing online marketing by chance. A guy came in one evening, and there were only a couple of companies doing it in Atlanta, and I thought that fit our business pretty well, so we decided to do it. And at the same time, because we were good payers, some of our suppliers started coming to us with deals on materials because they needed cash, and we were willing to pay COD.
COD, that's cash on delivery, just so you know.
So what we realized is that we had the retail customers because of our online marketing. We had material that we had purchased cheap because we were good payers. And what we found out during that time was that customers weren't really looking for the cheapest thing they could find. They were actually looking for good value. They were looking for a good deal. And after a while, I realized that our business had not slowed down any.
What Miles didn't realize then is that he had just found his business model, providing quality over quantity. Not the cheapest service, but the most reliable for everyone in the business. That was going to be incremental to his success.
Recessions are the best opportunity for good companies to make real money, because during good times, everybody has an advantage. But during bad times, the companies with a good business model really have the biggest advantages. So I got to thinking about it, and I realized we had plenty of work and we did have some cash on hand. So I started looking for opportunities, and I realized that we could go overseas and we could buy directly from the factories overseas and bypass the distributors locally. And it was another example of where being a good payer became a big advantage to us. The factories overseas normally would not have dealt with somebody small like us, but because the bigger distributors owed them money at the time and we were willing to pay COD for everything, they gave us the same prices as the larger distributors. And that was a huge advantage to us during that time.
So you mentioned that you're a good payer. How did you go about just prioritizing making sure that you're a good customer to the people that you buy things from?
That's funny. When we started during the two-man days and shortly after, one of my jobs was to pay the bills and to write paychecks and pay suppliers. And I had so much to do that it was just easier for me to pay when things showed up. That way I didn't have to worry about it later down the road. And so as we started to get bigger, it was just always my mindset that it's easier to manage if I know it's paid for.
That mentality right there, it's what took Miles to his first acquisition. Yes, people, we are getting to the heart of the matter. So far, we've heard how Miles got started. He built the foundations of his business, and until now, it's a small operation. But things are about to change, because you can't just grow a business through culture. Not in Miles' industry. So, in 2010, he made his first big move. Though, well, you know Miles. He's not going to put it this way.
I guess calling it an acquisition is probably a stretch. It was more of an opportunity. We had a small distributor, a supplier that was struggling, and they came to me and asked me, would we be willing to buy their assets, their inventory, their equipment. And at the time, we had started looking at importing from overseas, and we felt like it gave us an opportunity to become a distributor officially.
And you made that acquisition out of pocket. Is that correct?
Yes, again, having the mindset that if it's paid for, it's easier for me to keep up with. But it was a small acquisition. We had the cash available to us at the time. It allowed us to move quickly and to get the deal done. So that was kind of the motivation behind doing it out of pocket.
Do you think being debt adverse is a blessing or a curse?
In a way, it's been a blessing as far as the growth of our business. Having the cash on hand allows us to take advantage of opportunities. It allows us to do things quickly, but there are downsides to operating out of pocket. We have turned down opportunities because the amount of capital that we would have to put out was more than we were comfortable with. Once we make an acquisition, we put that money out there. Sometimes another opportunity comes along that we can't pursue.
There are pros and cons to buying out of pocket. So the lesson here is know your own relationship to money and work with that. It's something we've heard on this podcast before, but it bears repeating. If you're debt adverse, the Miles Crowe approach might be for you. But if buying with your own money makes you feel uncomfortable, consider a loan. When you feel secure, your head is clear, and you make better financial decisions, whatever that looks like for you. Oh, and remember, when you feel out of your depth, it's okay to ask for help. On a personal level, how did you cope with the first growth spurt?
I was doing the best I could. I didn't realize how much stress I had on me until one day a friend of mine hired me to do his countertops, and I ended up at his house at about 8 o'clock at night to measure his tops, and he mentioned to me that it looked like our business was doing great. And I responded to him, I said, thanks, but if it does any better, it's probably going to kill me. And I didn't realize it until I made that statement, how much stress I really had on me. I felt like, I was back to doing everything. I was planning production, I was programming machines, I was scheduling installation, I was now managing salespeople, I was even still doing sales. So something had to give at that point. And my friend said, brother, I've got a book you need to read. And he went into his office and he brought it back to me. And it was a book called The E-Myth.
If you don't know the E-Myth, it's a book by Michael E. Gerber. You can look it up in the show notes. I had to Google it, but the subtitle is Why Most Small Businesses Don't Work and What to Do About It. Speaks for itself, right? The book aims to break some business myths, like how we tend to think that people who start small companies are already entrepreneurs. That's a mistake, right? No one's born with it. The E-Myth also makes a point of saying, just because you can get the work done on a technical level doesn't mean you can run a business that provides that service. At that time, that really resonated with Miles.
Basically, the book talks about how most people struggle because they don't trust anybody to do it the way they do it, and they don't know how to delegate authority. So that was me to a T. The book really changed everything for me. What I realized is that my number one job was now to run the business and to grow the business. And I couldn't manage everything the way that I was. I was actually holding back the business. I had become the bottleneck.
So after that, Miles started giving people responsibilities.
And I found out that people were not only capable of handling them, they were eager to do it. And if they messed something up, I would just go over the situation with them and we would learn from it together and we would learn from our mistakes. And I learned that if you're truly going to give somebody authority, then you have to be willing to allow them to make mistakes. And that freed me up to focus on growing the business. And that's really when the business took off.
Did you see them more motivated once you started to delegate more?
Yes. Really, once you give authority to somebody, I think they feel like, obviously, that they're more important to the business. They don't want to let you down. So instead of standing around waiting for me to tell them to do something, they were actually eager to take on responsibility and grow the business with me.
It seems like that gives them a chance to show some ownership, some equity in the decision-making process.
Definitely. If we make a mistake, we own it and we make it right. If it costs money, we pay for it. And we know that doing the right thing always pays off in the long run. Our culture has not changed, even though our vision for the business has gotten bigger. It's still based on the idea that everyone counts and everyone is important.
I think at this point, Miles really discovered his leadership style. He found that he was happy to delegate, and that's a strength. I mean, to many that doesn't come naturally. And that's another lesson, really. When you grow, and a first acquisition is a major time for growth, let your people come with you. In this case, Miles was able to free up some time and explore his new role as a leader. And that took him to the next thing. So let's talk about 2012. This is a second acquisition that happened shortly after the first. What kind of deal was that?
So the second acquisition was completely different. It was an actual fabricator in the Chattanooga market, and the owner was struggling through the recession. He came to us actually looking to sell the business. They had gone from, at one point, a $3.5 million revenue business to about a $1.8 million revenue business. They were having cash flow issues. And what we actually ended up doing was going into a partnership with him, and we infused some capital into his business. And we assumed some of his debt and we took 51% ownership in the business.
To make a bold decision like that, Miles asks himself a few questions.
What can we do that will make that business better? And we're also looking at how will this business make our overall business better? What we saw there was an opportunity to introduce our business model into a new market.
Going for new markets, in Miles's industry, that's what it takes to get to the next stage.
I have a philosophy, it's just one man's opinion, that a fabricator can grow to $2.5–3 million managing everything themselves. To grow bigger than that, you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone and you're going to have to learn how to delegate authority. So some people get stuck right there. But if you can do that successfully, you can grow to maybe $7 million in one market doing countertops. But once you get to that level, you've either got to bring in new revenue streams like different product offerings, or you're going to have to look at different markets. And that's the way we chose to go, was to go into different markets.
And how did it work out?
At first, the first couple of years, it was definitely a learning experience. We had to change the culture of the business. It was our first experience going into somebody else's existing business, and we had to introduce a new business model, a new sales model. So it took time, and we didn't see immediate results like we had hoped. But after a couple of years, we started seeing that things were working the way we had planned, and we eventually bought the partner out in 2015, and it's done great. That first year, we were at about 1.8 million. In 2024, we're going to finish the year about 10 million in that one location.
It sounds like you have extreme confidence in your business model, and that makes you feel comfortable when you acquire a new business or expand into a new location.
Yes, a lot of that goes back to the fact that originally we're in the Atlanta market. And the Atlanta market is a very competitive, a very tough market. And I think as the song says, if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere. That's kind of the way we look at our business model. So that allowed us to be confident that we could go in and do it again.
And yes, my friends, they did it again. So Miles had already bought 2 other businesses. The first one, a buyout, pretty straightforward. The second one was a partnership with 51% ownership. This one was acquired in full further down the line. And the third, well, at this stage, we're moving into expert-level acquisition. You bought a business in Nashville that was about to close in the middle of the pandemic. What was your strategy there?
It was another opportunity that came to us. We had a tool supplier that told us about a company in Nashville that was trying to sell some equipment. So we called up there and I talked to the owner, and his plan was to sell the equipment and go out of business. But after about a 15-20 minute conversation, I asked him, would he like to sell the business as a whole? And he said, come up, let's talk. So me and my COO, we decided to take a drive up there, and we had a meeting with him, all of us wearing masks. And, what we found out was that he was in too deep to really save the business. He had a great location in Brentwood, which is, a great part of the Nashville market. He had a spectacular showroom. It was a really nice showroom. But what we saw was that they did not have any inventory. They had a sales process that put a lot of work on the customers, sent them out to different locations. And, through our experience, we knew that when you do that, customers don't always come back. Most of the time, they don't come back.
He may say it was all opportunity, but it's pretty clear that Miles has a knack for this. With this one, he really made a calculated risk. He saw a business that wasn't doing well, but was a potential asset for him, and he identified issues that he could fix.
I read another book at one point. It was called The Walmart Way, and it talks about the reason Walmart became so big and so successful was that somebody realized that when a customer walks in the store to buy something, you can't sell it to them if it's not there. So Walmart really became the first to master the logistics and the supply chain. And what I realized is that when our customers come to us, the retail customers come to us, they need to find something that they fall in love with and that they can become attached to. So the more inventory we have, the more choices that we have, the better chance that we have to make that sell. So while tastes change, it's still an emotional process. And that process happens in front of the material. It happens in front of our inventory. So again, we had proven in Chattanooga that our model could be expanded into a different market. And we saw that opportunity in Nashville to bring in our materials, our sales process, our marketing. It was geographically well located, which is important to us, and we felt like we would have success there.
So, takeaway from acquisition number 3, always go for a problem that you know inside and out. That's how you give yourself a good start. Now, to finish our timeline, Miles's latest acquisition was made in 2023. It's pretty recent. And this one brought him back full circle to the Atlanta market.
We were able to make an acquisition of a company and their assets over in Norcross, which is the northeast part of Metro Atlanta. And the thinking there was that was a part of the city that we don't really have access to. We don't draw customers in from over there. There's a lot of competition. So we felt like that was just going into a completely separate market. And it's turned out to be the case.
For anyone listening, what's your biggest takeaway or pro tip to seal a good deal?
So my thinking is that it has to be a good deal for both sides. The seller has intentions, he has goals, and of course we have our own goals. And you're never going to get a situation where you get everything you want, and you have to let the seller get some of what they want in order to make a deal happen.
Do you think your experience in sales has helped you become a good negotiator?
Definitely. Yeah. Maybe not the typical acquisition guy. I'm not a pushy person. I'm not going to go in and force my views on the seller. And sometimes you have to give them time and give them space, and just like customers buying countertops.
Acquisitions come in all shapes and sizes, and the Miles Crowe approach has always been to give it time and build on the opportunity. Hearing his story today, it's clear he's come pretty far. As for the next stage,
we've been able to grow rapidly with a small group of people. We will finish 2024 at about 27 million in sales. We're still a very small group managing 5 different businesses. So in order for us to continue to grow, we know we're going to have to develop that next level of management, the C-suite management team. And the challenge for us is going to be how to find the people and how to introduce them without changing the culture that we have here. I think in the business world especially, we get caught up in degrees and qualifications and what company did you work for, but we lose sight of the personal traits that make somebody successful. We built from within, so what we found is that people have talents in there. They all have talents, and the challenge as a leader is to draw those talents out.
Beside finding new talent, another challenge will be to take the company's revenue further up and grow into the middle market.
We feel like we have the potential to grow from where we're at to 100 million in sales in revenue over the next 5 to 10 years. We're a very fragmented industry, a lot of small companies. We are now one of the larger granite fabricators in the country, believe it or not. And as the deals get bigger, we're probably even going to have to bring on some debt, access some capital. And I do see private equity money starting to come into our industry. We see strategic buyouts happening as well. I think that's going to continue. So those are going to be some of the challenges for us to continue to grow.
And for the next industry trend, Miles has his eyes on sustainability.
What we sell is mostly natural products. And so it makes sense that the waste from these products can be recycled. We have found ways to recycle our products, but we think we're operating at a scale now to where having a standalone recycling facility may make sense. So that's something we'd love to do.
Looks like you're in keeping with the current culture and some of the values that some younger people have.
Yeah, we see the younger consumer more concerned about sustainable practices. In Europe and in South America, where a lot of our products come from, a lot of the quarries, the local governments are forcing them to renew the quarries and to make them eco-friendly again. We see that this is a consumer-driven process at this point, but it's also the right thing to do. I go back to that. You got to do something with your waste, and if you can recycle it, it's the right thing to do.
The right thing to do? That's the Miles Crowe leadership in a nutshell. And if you take anything away from this episode, let it be this. Acquisitions are a tool for growth. First, find your footing in the industry. Get a client base and a good team. When you know what your company model is, When you have the confidence in your culture, you're in a much better place to expand. Whether it's buying assets, building a partnership, or taking over a company that's about to go bust, there are many types of acquisitions. So be open to opportunities. Chances are they will come knocking, but you still need a strategy to make them a success. After all, acquisitions are a risk, so look at the company you're interested in critically. What are their qualities? What are they not doing well? And do you know how to fix the issue? Start with a plan. It won't always be easy to implement a new culture or business model, but if you know where you're headed, you're better prepared for the journey. Finally, before you seal the deal, ask yourself 2 fundamental questions. What would I gain for this? And what am I bringing to the table on the other side? An acquisition is mutually beneficial. You want to make the most of this new partnership. It's like Miles said, talent is everywhere to be found.
Find the right people, give them room to grow, give them opportunities, and I think you'll be surprised what they will do for you and for your business. Don't do what everyone else is doing just because that's what everyone else is doing. And then finally, like I've been saying, do the right thing. It pays off. It always pays off in the long run.
We loved having Miles Crowe on the show today. We hope you were inspired by his story, humility, and wisdom. We wish him the best in shaping the future of Crowe Custom Countertops. Oh, and a final word for the football fanatics. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
That's it.
Thanks, Miles. I'll see you all next week on In Good Companies. Until then, if you like this episode and want to hear more, follow us, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And when business is hot, you'll be the first to know. You can always leave a review or a 5-star rating or share this podcast around. The more, the merrier. In Good Companies is a podcast from Cadence Bank, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. Our production team is Natalie Barron and Edie Pengelly. Our executive producer is Daniel Cornell. This podcast is made in collaboration with the team at Lower Street. Writing and production from Lise Lavati.
This podcast is provided as a free service to you and is for general informational purposes only. Cadence Bank and its affiliates make no representation or warranties as to the accuracy, completeness, or timeliness of the content in the podcast. The podcast is not intended to provide legal, accounting, or tax advice and should not be relied upon for such purposes. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests in this podcast are solely their own current opinions regarding the subject matters discussed in the podcast and are based on their own perspectives.